In the fight against ISIS, today the U.S. Defense Secretary announced that 200 new U.S. Special Ops troops are heading to Syria.
Tonight, as the battle against ISIS intensifies, the increase in U.S. forces designed with one purpose:
bringing down the full weight of U.S. forces around the theater of operations, like the funnel of a giant tornado. Now, to ensure the success of isolating Raqqa, generate sufficient local forces to seize Raqqa, and deny ISIL sanctuary beyond Raqqa, I can tell you today that the United States will deploy approximately 200 additional U.S. forces in Syria, including Special Operations Forces trainers, advisors, and explosive ordnance disposal teams.
Addressing a security conference in Bahrain, Ashton Carter said that the extra troops will join the 300 special forces already stationed in Syria. On Russia's involvement in Syria, Carter noted that Moscow has only, quote, inflamed the civil war and prolonged the suffering of the Syrian people. Damascus is strongly opposed to the presence of U.S. troops on Syrian soil and calls American deployments as a violation of its sovereignty. Catherine Shungdam, why is the U.S. doing this at this point? What goals do they hope to achieve by this?
I think it's just one word, it's Aleppo. It's the simple fact that if the Syrian army is actually gaining against Daesh militants, and the US is looking at its partner, Daesh, to be on the losing side, and it doesn't want to do this. So it's trying to spin a new narrative, trying to, find a new angle to sell its war in Syria and find a way to topple President Bashar al-Assad. It's that simple. The problem that we have is that the US is painting this new operation, this arrival of further troops in Syria, as if it is a good thing. We have to remember that it's actually against the law, because in essence, what the US is doing is invading another country, and it's not helping counter-terrorism when Damascus has not given the US its permission to actually enter its territory. Therefore, under international law, it actually qualifies as an act of war.
In other developments this week, it was made easier for groups which assist US operations in Syria to receive military support from Washington. It's after President Obama waived part of the Arms Control Export Act, and there's a newly created rebel group ready for more weapons too. Known as the Syrian Elite Forces, they're 45,000 strong, and according to the American army, are fighting ISIL in northern Syria. Their leader is well known to Western governments as a prominent Syrian opposition figure. In fact, in the past, he's met French President Francois Hollande and the US Secretary of State John Kerry. But among US lawmakers, there are some who oppose Washington's decision here too.
We must stop this madness. We must stop arming terrorists. I'm introducing the Stop Arming Terrorists Act today to prohibit taxpayer dollars from being used to support terrorists.
In Syria, where the government has recaptured 93% of Aleppo, Russia's defense ministry says more than 20,000 civilians have escaped through humanitarian corridors heading into the city's government-held areas. Over 1,000 rebels have laid down their arms. Moscow added Syrian troops will continue to liberate eastern Aleppo once the removal of civilians is complete.
Secretary of State John Kerry met with Arab and European foreign officials in Paris to discuss the crisis with Syrian opposition leaders, and in particular, the withdrawal of opposition forces.
Russia and Assad have a moment here where they are obviously in a dominant position. They have an ability to be able to show a little grace.
And Secretary Kerry said that even if Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's regime retakes eastern Aleppo, it will still not end the vicious and horrific civil war.
According to the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, Islamic State militants entered the ancient city of Palmyra on Saturday in eastern Syria. They advanced to the city's outskirts for the first time since losing the city earlier this year. The War Monitor said the militants had entered Palmyra after they had taken strategic heights near the city and captured the northern part of the city and mountains around it. The Syrian army earlier said it had sent reinforcements to Palmyra to help defend it. A rebel from the countryside said some troops were being diverted there from Aleppo, easing pressure on rebels who were there facing a last push by the army to oust them from the city. The city had been recaptured from the militants last March in what was hailed as a major victory for the government and the biggest reversal for Islamic State in Syria since Russia's intervention.
Now to the pair of explosions outside a major soccer stadium in Istanbul, Turkey. The scene gruesome. At least 15 dead, more than 60 wounded. The blast so strong, people miles away were knocked off their seats by the sheer force. We go to ABC's Lama Hassan for the latest.
Tonight, police swarming to the scene of the powerful blasts. The bombs going off outside a soccer stadium just as the match ended. A Turkish newscast capturing the moment the impact of the explosion was felt. Armed police rushing to secure the streets, firing their weapons in the air. The Interior Minister claiming those police were the targets. Dozens of officers rushed to the hospital wounded by the twin explosions. At least 15 killed. There is no claim of responsibility yet, but the country has been hit by a series of bomb attacks blamed on ISIS and Kurdish rebels who want independence.
Well, Turkey's ruling AK party has submitted proposals to Parliament for major constitutional reforms. The package of proposals was presented to the legislature after AKP secured the support of the opposition Nationalist Movement Party, MHP. If ratified, the governing system would transfer from parliamentary to executive presidency. Now, the changes would grant President Recep Tayyip Erdogan more power and allow him to seek presidency until 2029.
France is seeking to extend a state of emergency until July the 15th next year. The Prime Minister, Bernard Cazeneuve, said the enhanced security measures are necessary, citing a heightened risk of attacks by Islamist groups coinciding with 2017 elections. The declaration is needed to ensure the highest level of protection, as it gives police extended powers to search and arrest. However, the extension proposal needs to be approved by the National Assembly, which is expected to hold a debate on Tuesday. The state of emergency currently in place, a response to the November 2015 Paris attacks, was set to end in mid-January.
This just in, federal investigators are trying to determine if there is a connection between 3 different plane threats. Sources say United Airlines Flight 443 from San Francisco landed safely at Newark Airport tonight after a report of a threatening note on board. A similar threat affected a flight heading to Kennedy Airport. And there was a third bomb threat, this one aimed at a charter flight carrying the Boston Celtics. That plane landed safely in Oklahoma City.
All right, for the first time in American history, deaths caused by heroin use have surpassed those caused by guns. New data from the CDC show there were nearly 13,000 heroin-related deaths in 2015. That's 10 more than gun-related homicides. The number of deaths due to opioid overdose also surged, reaching more than 30,000 last year, 4 times the amount in 1999. The new findings highlight recent government surveys showing more than 20 million adults have a substance use problem.
It is a light beacon, like a lighthouse that's up on top of the hill.
Every day, weather permitting, 81-year-old Frances Blackburn walks 2 miles around the city of Spur.
Start out early in the morning, go over the hill, stop at the cross, say my little prayers, and then I go on my merry way.
Her granddaughter, Polly Daza, works at the car wash in town with a perfect view of the cross in Swenson Park.
And I can look right up and see the cross, and I know God's watching me, so I know I'm okay.
These family members say they are disheartened by the letter the Freedom from Religion Foundation sent to the city of Spur.
We feel secure with the cross here. It's part of Spur, it's part of us.
Despite these residents' desire to keep the cross up, the Freedom from Religion Foundation says the permanent display of a cross on public land is unconstitutional. In the letter, Foundation attorney Rebecca Markert says the cross conveys a message to non-Christians saying they aren't, quote, favored members of the political community.
Protests today outside the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Pasadena.
Members of the LGBTQ community are very concerned about a video being screened tonight at the church. The video was made by the Coming Out Ministries. It's a group that claims homosexuality is not natural.
I felt dirty. I felt, well, I had been tainted.
This is a trailer for a documentary called Journey Interrupted. It's about a group of people who were gay and, according to them, gave their life to God and gave up what they called their temptations. The film is being shown at Pasadena Seventh-day Adventist Church tomorrow, where Janelle Delgado is planning a protest against it.
They're saying it's not conversion therapy, but regardless, they're still asking people to oppress who they are.
Michael Carducci is one of the people featured in the film. He says he lived as a gay man for nearly 40 years before he says he surrendered to God.
We're not here to tell somebody that they can't be gay, and we certainly aren't here to say that God doesn't love someone who's gay.
we're just here to give you another option.
Wayne Blakely is also in the film. He says his faith has led him to choose celibacy over homosexuality.
The Lord has shown me to surrender my temptations and my fleshly desires to Him and live according to His will.
But Ryan Bell says he left the church as a minister because it's not tolerant towards gay people by calling them sinners. And Journey Interrupted is an example of what he calls the problem.
What that does is it teaches people to be ashamed of their identity, ashamed of who they are as people.
And demonstrators say they plan to hand out flyers with information to an LGBT center. As for the church, they say that everyone is welcome to come in and check out the film for themselves.
The Passover lamb has a large significance in the Jewish faith.
A local couple have been collecting Jacob sheep in the hopes of returning them to Israel.
Pet them.
They are an endangered animal in the world. There are no Jacob sheep currently in Israel. And what we hope to do is establish a biblical Jacob Sheep Heritage Park.
We came out one day and kept volunteering and got really attached to the sheep. We believe in what they're trying to do.
The flock of sheep has been wandering around for a very, very long period of time. First from the time of the Exodus to the ancient Middle East, to Spain, to Britain, and then finally here to Canada.
But the sheep don't like the wind.
It's returning an animal to its source, its original habitat. And so the Jacob sheep parallel the story of the Jewish people that they now will be returning also after 2,000 years back to the land of Israel. So this is nothing short but a miracle.
Just like the Jewish people, they need to return. And there are scriptures that say that, but nobody's ever really thought that it would literally come true.
The 2,000-year saga of the return of Jacob's sheep to the Holy Land as prophesied by Ezekiel was officially launched with the first of 11 flights that took place last week. The timing of this tremendous occurrence is deeply biblically significant and may in fact shed light on the fascinating history of the patriarch's herd. On November 30, 119 sheep landed in Israel, coincidentally the same day rains at last began to fall in Israel, ending a difficult drought. This was precisely as Ezekiel had prophesied. I will deliver them out of all places whither they have been scattered in the day of clouds and thick darkness. Ezekiel 34 verse 12. This remarkable story began when Gil and Jenna Lewinsky, a couple that met in Israel and moved to Canada, first set eyes on the unique sheep 3 years ago. Despite never having farmed, something about the sheep spoke to their souls. They bought a herd of 70 and began a not-for-profit farm. In their hearts, they knew the sheep were destined for greater things than producing wool and milk. Though the breed has its genetic roots in the Holy Land, there are no Jacob's sheep in the Middle East today. The Lewinskys changed all that when they decided to bring Jacob's flock home. It took 3 years of wrestling with the bureaucracy of importing livestock before the actual journey could begin. Since Canada is not listed as a country permitted to export livestock to Israel, the petition was initially rejected in 2015. About ready to give up, the Lewinskys received a blessing for the endeavor from Rabbi Amiram Vanin, a well-known mystic from Ashdod. The rabbi was thrilled when he saw photos of the sheep and the undeniable resemblance to their biblical ancestors. Rav Vanin stated that the sheep have a special blessing on them from Jacob in the Bible. Gil told Breaking Israel News. The rabbi said that the shofar horn from the Jacob sheep is the most holy in the whole world. After the intervention of diplomats of the Israeli embassy in Ottawa, the petition to bring the herd of Jacob's sheep was reconsidered and accepted. The actual journey began 3 months ago when the sheep boarded a truck for a 3,000-mile journey from British Columbia to Toronto. In a distinctly Ezekiel-inspired manner, the journey was accompanied by thunder and lightning. After a stressful 4-month quarantine, they prepared to board planes for Israel. Even this part of the journey was fraught with difficulty. El Al Airlines had generously agreed to subsidize 90% of the flight from Toronto to Israel, the largest airlift of animals in Israeli history, but a strike by the pilots forced the Lewinskys to make other arrangements, costing them an additional $80,000. That rainy day 1 week ago, when the first shipment of sheep arrived, was also the 28th day of the Hebrew month of Cheshvan. This was the day, untold thousands of years ago, when Noah, after a similar journey with his menagerie, offered up a sacrifice to God after weathering the storm. Gill also pointed out that during their arduous journey with 119 sheep, not one sheep died or failed the rigorous tests given by the Department of Agriculture. Normally, about 12% of animals fail such tests.
See the desert bloom and an ancient plan revived in Israel, perhaps for the first time in 1,500 years. Could this be used in a third temple?
Meet Guy Ehrlich, visionary, farmer, and possible provider of plants needed for incense for a future third temple.
This is the Balm of Gilead farm. This is the nursery. The vision was to grow the Balm of Gilead and then to make an industry out of it.
Ehrlich's still in the early stages, but already he's helping turn the desert green on a tract of land near the Dead Sea and Jericho. It started with the balsamone tree, better known as the Balm of Gilead.
For 1,000 years, ancient Hebrew farmers in this area were the only ones known in the world to cultivate this exotic plant. They used it for medicinal and cosmetic purposes. Now Ehrlich's biotech venture is reviving that trade and more.
It says it's the first ingredient of the incense of the Holy Temple. And since the Second Temple period, it says it was the anointing oil of the kings of Israel. At the 6th century, it disappeared from here together with the Jewish people.
Ehrlich got his first plant from a shoot that was smuggled by a German scientist out of Saudi Arabia and brought to Israel. Oddly enough, the plants he grows are thriving in the intense heat and salty soil on the shores of the Dead Sea. Ehrlich also grows frankincense on his plantation.
This is the frankincense of the Holy Temple. There is no agriculture for this tree. This tree only grows wild in different countries in the Horn of Africa, and since there is such a demand for it, there is an overusing of the plant.
Ehrlich is also growing myrrh, and there may be a connection to the gifts the Magi brought Jesus at his birth.
Another way to introduce myself is as a Magi. You know the 3 Magi that brought Miriam presents? They gave her frankincense and myrrh and gold. Now there is a claim that the gold is the Balm of Gilead because it was more precious than gold. This is the diamond of the incense, the diamond of the medical plants.
Ehrlich, who describes himself as a man of faith but not religious, is also growing a number of other plants needed to make the incense for the temple. That has caught the attention of some religious Jews who would like to see a third temple built in Jerusalem.
I definitely didn't think that I was going to serve the temple, and I was surprised from the amount of temple fans that came to visit me. When Rabbi Ariel was here, I told him that I'd be more than happy to supply the incense for the temple, and I'll do my best to be ready with the incense till the temple will be here.
Miracles can happen for you. You can overcome. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. It means everything to have the scholarship. I just want people to know that are in similar situations that all isn't lost, that even though you made so many mistakes within your life and you feel trapped, you feel helpless, you feel hopeless, that it's not over.